What crime could be so vile that the Romans believed mere death was not enough? The act in question was parricide, the murder of one's own parent. This was seen as an offense so severe that it transcended the usual boundaries of Roman law and morality. To murder a parent wasn't just a personal crime against a family member. It was considered an assault on the very foundation of Roman society. The Roman legal system, known for its relative pragmatism and military efficiency, reserved one of its most brutal and symbolic punishments for this specific act. The Poena Cullei parricide was regarded by the Romans as an unparalleled violation. It was not treason nor rebellion, but the killing of a parent, which in their eyes represented a direct challenge to the moral order of the universe. This crime struck at the heart of the family structure, which was a cornerstone of Roman civilization. The paterfamilias, the head of the household, was seen not only as a ruler within his family, but as a protector of Roman values. Killing the paterfamilias, or any parent, was an affront to Roman law, tradition, and religion. The origins of the punishment can be traced back to the Lex Pompeius Parricidius, a law passed during the late Roman Republic. This law, attributed to Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, better known as Pompey the Great, was designed to deal with the crime of parricide in a way that underscored its gravity. The penalty wasn't just about executing the criminal. It was about ensuring that the crime itself was erased from memory. The Romans, with their deep belief in ancestral sanctity, understood that to kill one's parent was to destroy not just an individual, but an entire lineage, a thread in the intricate web of Roman history. The Poena Cullei was a punishment meant to do more than just end the life of the parricide. It was designed to obliterate the individual entirely from the Roman world. Unlike many Roman executions, which could be relatively quick and straightforward, the Poena Cullei was a ritualized process that symbolized a complete and utter erasure of the criminal. The condemned individual was to be sewn inside a leather sack with a selection of symbolic animals and then cast into a river. This punishment was meant not just to kill, but to ensure that the criminal was forgotten, denied both a proper burial and the ability to pass into the afterlife. In ancient Rome, punishment was often seen as a reflection of the crime's severity. The Poena Cullei was a punishment designed to make the act of parricide unthinkable. It was a chilling reminder that, in Roman eyes, some offenses were so heinous that the punishment couldn't just be a simple death. It had to be a symbolic obliteration, a punishment that reached beyond the physical realm and into the very soul of the offender. Death was not enough. The criminal had to be erased, his existence rendered void in the eyes of society. This brutal execution method reflected the Romans' deep respect for family. The family, in Roman society, was not just a domestic unit, was the cornerstone of Roman social and political life. The head of the household was not only in charge of his immediate family, but also held the responsibility of passing down Roman traditions, laws, and moral values. To kill one's own parent was to commit an act of sacrilege, a betrayal of everything that was sacred in Roman life. The punishment for parricide, therefore, had to reflect the gravity of the crime. The criminal was not simply to be executed. He was to be shamed, isolated, and dehumanized in a way that sent a powerful message to the rest of Roman society. The sanctity of the family must never be violated. The Roman people held family loyalty above all else, and to destroy that loyalty was to destroy the very essence of Roman society. The concept of the Poena Cullei was rooted in Roman beliefs about death, the afterlife, and ancestral honor. In the Roman world, the dead were not forgotten. The dead lived on in the memories of their families, and in the rites performed for them. To be denied a proper burial was to be denied a place in the afterlife. For the Romans, this was a fate worse than death itself. Without the ritual of burial and remembrance, the parricide would have no legacy, no place in history. His memory would be erased, and he would be forgotten by his people. Furthermore, the act of casting the criminal into the river was more than just a form of execution. It was a final act of erasure, symbolizing the removal of the criminal from the fabric of Roman society. The river, often the Tiber in Rome, acted as a natural barrier, the criminal's body would be washed away, and with it, any memory of the crime. The Romans believed that the body of the condemned should be denied the earth's embrace, symbolizing the lack of any connection to the land, family, or Rome itself. In this sense, the Poena Cullei was not just an execution but a complete denial of the criminal's humanity. The ritual ensured that the parricide was not remembered, that his crime was erased, and that no trace of him would remain in the records of Roman history. He would be cut off from his family, his society, and his heritage, leaving behind only a void where his existence once stood. Through the Poena Cullei, the Romans communicated their deep belief in the sanctity of family and the ultimate importance of preserving order within the household. The punishment symbolized the rupture of the most fundamental bond between a parent and child. By enacting such a severe and symbolic punishment, Rome hoped to prevent this crime from ever occurring again, reinforcing the idea that the family was the bedrock of Roman society. Thus, the Poena Cullei was more than a punishment. It was a statement of Roman values, a public display of what was considered sacred, and a warning to those who might consider betraying the bonds of family. For the Romans, there were few things more horrifying than parricide, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to ensure that the crime would never be allowed to corrupt the sacred order of their civilization. The Poena Cullei was not a random execution. It was a highly ritualistic and symbolic form of punishment. Each aspect of the procedure, from the animals chosen to be placed in the sack with the condemned to the method of execution itself, was deliberately designed to emphasize the gravity of the crime, to dishonor the criminal in every conceivable way. The animals selected for the sack were not chosen at random. Every creature that accompanied the parricide into the sack had deep symbolic meaning, rooted in Roman cultural beliefs and traditions. The animals represented various aspects of the crime: the criminal's moral failings and the destruction of the sacred family order. The most common animals to be chosen were a dog, a snake, a monkey, and a rooster. Each of these creatures was emblematic of different negative qualities that the Romans associated with the crime of parricide. These animals were not just random companions for the condemned. They were symbols of impurity, betrayal, and chaos. In the confined space of the sack, the condemned would be forced to share their final moments with these creatures, heightening the sense of dishonor and degradation. The dog, traditionally seen as man's loyal companion, was chosen because of its dual nature in Roman society. While dogs were often valued for their loyalty and service, they were also associated with impurity and scavenging. In Roman thought, dogs were scavengers, creatures that fed on death and decay. By placing a dog in the sack with the criminal, the punishment emphasized the dishonor of the parricide. The criminal was no longer considered human. They were reduced to a state of degradation, chained not to the purity of family bonds, but to an animal that feasted on the dead. The snake, on the other hand, was a potent symbol of betrayal and treason. In Roman literature and philosophy, snakes were frequently associated with deceit and moral corruption. Pliny the Elder, a Roman naturalist, referred to serpents as creatures of eternal deceit, highlighting their association with treachery. For the Romans, there could be no more fitting companion for a parricide than a snake, a creature that embodied the very essence of betrayal. The act of parricide was, in the Roman worldview, a betrayal not just of an individual, but of the very social and moral order that kept society intact. The monkey, a rare and unsettling creature in Roman times, symbolized a perverted form of humanity. Unlike the dog or snake, the monkey was not feared because of its destructive nature, but because it represented a distorted version of man. In Roman culture, monkeys were seen as grotesque imitations of human creatures that mocked humanity, but lacked its dignity and rationality. By being placed in the sack with a monkey, the criminal was denied any form of human dignity. The presence of the monkey in the sack underscored the unnaturalness of the crime, transforming the parricide into something less than human, an abomination to both nature and society. The rooster, especially the black variety, was seen as a symbol of chaos and the unknown dot. In Roman culture, roosters were often associated with sacrifice and omens. The frantic crowing of the rooster inside the sack would have been heard as an ominous sound, a final herald of doom before the criminal's destruction. The rooster's symbolism as a creature of sacrifice only heightened the sense of impending doom for the criminal. The animal's presence in the sack served as a reminder that the parricide's fate was sealed not just by the Romans, but by the very forces of nature itself. The combination of these animals in the sack created a grotesque image of chaos, betrayal, and spiritual corruption. The sack itself, which had once been a symbol of birth and potential life, was turned into a dark parody of the womb, that instead of nurturing new life, the sack delivered the condemned into an abyss of disgrace, stripping the parricide of any remaining humanity and denying them a place in society. The river into which the sack was cast did not cleanse, it obliterated. The criminal would not be granted the peace of a proper burial, the reverence of a funeral, or the remembrance of their family. They were lost to the river, erased from the annals of Roman history. The process of carrying out the Poena Cullei was just as ritualistic as the symbolic choice of animals. The first step in the punishment was a scourging, a brutal beating with rods that served to strip the parricide of their civic status. This public humiliation was not just a physical punishment, but a way of reducing the criminal to a mere object of contempt. The parricide was no longer seen as a person under Roman law. They were less than human. After the scourging, the condemned was sewn into the sack with the selected animals. The binding of the parricide's limbs ensured that they could not move or escape, forcing them to share their final moments with the creatures that symbolized their moral and social corruption. Once sealed inside the sack, the condemned was transported to the nearest body of water, usually the Tiber River in Rome. The choice of the river was significant. The river, in Roman belief, was a place of transition, a boundary between life and death, between the human world and the divine. However, for the parricide, the river was not a place of cleansing or passage, it was the final destination. The sack, heavy with the weight of the criminal and the animals, was thrown into the river, where the condemned would drown. The process of drowning, however, was not the end of the ritual, it was the final act of erasure. The criminal was denied the peace of a grave, the protection of the earth, and the ability to pass into the afterlife. In the eyes of the Romans, the parricide was lost to time, never to be remembered again. As the practice of Poena Cullei persisted throughout the centuries, it became increasingly rare. By the late 3rd century CE, the punishment began to disappear from widespread use. The reasons for its decline were many, but perhaps the most significant factor was the rise of Christianity within the Roman Empire. As the empire transitioned from paganism to Christianity, many of the ancient rituals and punishments, rooted in Roman religious beliefs, were abandoned. Christianity brought with it a new understanding of justice, one that focused less on ritual and symbolic punishment and more on concepts like forgiveness and redemption. The last official reference to the Poena Cullei appears in the 6th century CE in the Codex Justinianus, a compilation of Roman laws compiled under Emperor Justinian. By this time, the punishment had become obsolete, replaced by simpler and more direct forms of execution, such as beheading or burning. Though the practice had been revived briefly under Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century, it was clear that by the time of Constantine the Great, the Poena Cullei was no longer seen as a practical or necessary form of justice. By the end of late antiquity, the Poena Cullei had become a relic of a past era, a chilling reminder of Rome's emphasis on family, order, and morality. The punishment, once a central element of Roman law, was now viewed as excessive and archaic. The rise of Christianity had fundamentally transformed Roman legal and moral values, and with it, the Poena Cullei faded into history.